Welcome. To start with, what's your name and where are you now?
Okay, my name is Tim Carrette. Where am I now? You mean geographically?
Well, you can take it any way you want. It can also be where are you here and now, as in your internal mental emotional space.
That second part could take a while to answer. In fact, maybe the whole of this interview is an answer to that.
Yes.
I can start with the easy information, the geography. I'm up on the North Yorkshire coast.
What is it that attracted you to that coast?
Well, that's a good question. I've always had a fondness for Yorkshire, and my family are originally from Leeds in Yorkshire. And as a child, we would often go on holiday to little villages along the coast of Yorkshire, like Staves and Robin Hood's Bay. But now I'm a little bit further down at Scarborough. But the natural landscape, the cliffs, the moorlands, and even the small towns of Scarborough and Whitby are full of contact and joy and fun.
Yeah.
They're obviously always also full of the challenges of life, like any other place. But there's something, I suppose, that in Yorkshire that resonates with my heart and soul.
Can you name that?
That which resonates. Maybe not. Maybe that may be unnameable. Maybe a longing or a belonging. Something about being, the longing to be where you belong.
Oh, that's a lovely, that's a lovely place to be. And then another easy question, but who are you as a person?
Yeah, you said easy. That is not an easy question, because I'm lots of things as a person. As a person, I'm constantly changing and changed by every moment and every encounter. So as a person, I am here with you now, answering these questions and listening to my body, to my heart and soul and mind. So in some senses, who I am as a person is that which responds, resonates to the situation that I'm in. So I live, therefore, as a procession of selves. In some moments, I am the ocean and the trees, and the mountains and the river. And some moments I'm with another human being, in various forms, depending on how the journey and the encounter goes. We'll see who else I become in this encounter.
And I'm curious about that, the responding, and I'm always wondering, what are those places you respond from? Where is that kind of peaceful center in you that kind of hears yourself and me at the same time?
Where is it?
Or how does it look like? It doesn't matter how it's positioned.
Okay.
Or how do you access it? That's another, yeah.
That one's a little bit easier. How I access it. How I access that place in me that knows something of the authenticity of me is, again, through various ways, not just one way. In silence and stillness, I find traces of my authentic being. In nature, certainly next to the ocean, or listening to the wind in the trees or the birds. And also in relationship to other people, to you in this moment, to your questions, your curiosity, your smiles, your nodding in my direction, and that I'm receiving as affirmation that it's okay, this situation, for me to risk a little of being just who I am, emerging as in relation to you. So I feel that in my body, heart and soul, and my senses are guiding me.
It's really beautiful. I was just at the coast of Portugal and in contact with the ocean, and it is incredible to be at that, I would say, edge of two worlds.
Nice.
And I'm wondering, because you do live at the coast, what happens for you at that edge?
Yeah, that's a great question, because I've also been by the sea here and abroad this summer, and a whole load of things happen which I'm curious about. The coastal line right next to where I live here is I will obviously walk there often with my dog, and the cliffs here are, with erosion, they are crumbling away. So I can walk on this beach, and there's the crumbling cliffs on one side, and then there's often the roar of the ocean on the other side. And so as I walk, I'm between these two powers, and sometimes I can feel some fear of, wow, the power of the ocean, the power with which life fades away and is destroyed naturally, and the fear of what are we doing to the planet, which is in the mix there. And so I'm mindful to be very careful as I walk sometimes on the beach here. On all beaches, I have huge respect for the power of the ocean. But over the summer, I also went to Europe, went to Greece, where the sea was a lot calmer and very clear. And I just lay in the sea and just floated with the sun on me. Absolute relaxation and peace. So I guess like all of us, the ocean has many moods.
Yeah.
And we can relate to them, and sometimes feel excitement and fear, sometimes peace and tranquility. There's something in the ocean, I think, that resonates with the waters within us. We are apparently 70% water. So I guess the ocean, as well as the moon, is moving us.
It's interesting as you're talking about this. I'm hearing also the ocean and you have different contact boundaries, and they are changing as you change and as the ocean changes. I don't know if that's
for sure.
Yeah.
You don't know if that's.
I don't know if that's your experience. It was my experience as you were talking about that.
It's absolutely my experience.
Sorry.
Permeable and impermeable contact boundaries. Constantly in a process of change.
Yes.
But depending upon the situation, the external environmental, ecological situation, and the internal situation of the way my being is in each moment, the encounters I'm carrying, the love and the challenges that ebb and flow inside my heart and soul.
And I'm curious, in this process of selfing, as you describe it, what are some values that you carry, and how do you hold them in your life or in your process?
how do I hold them? It's an interesting one. What are my values? I think one of my overriding values is equality.
Mm-hmm.
The uniqueness of every single human being
Mm-hmm.
has a place in the story of life. And we absolutely need the differences within each encounter, within each person, within each animal, within each plant, within everything. Needs and deserves respect. So that's probably one of my core values, is that we all have a place. We all have a tune to play that is part of a greater chorus of life. That would be one of my central values, and that is always changing. That every moment is brand new. Every single moment is a brand new opportunity, which has never existed before and will never exist ever again.
And so how do you, in the Fritz Perls book, there is one sentence, ego, hunger, aggression, which he says, it takes years to become present now. And I'm wondering, what was your process of coming into the now, and how did you navigate that?
Okay, so coming into the now, in some ways suggests that I am there and always in the now, and yet I'm not. And paradoxically, how can I not be? So paradoxically, I am and I'm not in the now. My mind will play little tapes, little songs, little stories, and different encounters in life require me to, as it were, not be in the now, to remember what happened then or anticipate what's going to be happening in the future. But of course, all that is part of the now.
Yeah.
It's the larger now.
Oh yes, I love that.
Yeah. The whole now, we could say. How did I get there in my life? Well, as a child, I would have been born there naturally and educated and really taken away, encouraged away from my preoccupation with the now, necessarily, I suppose, as a child, because there are dangers in the world that I needed to learn. They're also part of the now. I re-entered my interest in the now when I was at university studying social work, and at the same time I was studying Zen Buddhism and practicing Zen Buddhism, and beginning to learn alternative approaches to social work that were not just about taking people to court and punishing them or threatening them or labeling them, but I really, of course, wanted to understand what it was really, what was at the root of their current difficulties and challenges. So that's when I started being interested in Gestalt therapy. I went to my first ever Gestalt weekend with Peter Phillipson over in Lancaster. And it completely blew my mind. So a combination of being introduced to Gestalt and being interested in exploring Eastern religions and Zen Buddhism, and having never stopped from that point on now, so 30 years on, being in different ways interested in what's happening now. And so I sometimes I look at all the books that are in my house. I decorate my shelves and walls with all these books, and so many books saying so many different things. But if you can, as has happened to me, somebody said, "What have you learned from reading all these books?" And the one thing that I think most of the books, are, of course, are about therapy, Gestalt therapy, or spirituality. The one thing is, you know, what's happening here and now. Is come back to now.
Yeah.
You can summarize all those books. It would be, and now, and now.
Mm, mm. That's interesting. I often, as I love to read a whole variety of books, sometimes I have this moment of like, and if I would just drop them all and come now, how much
Mm.
wisdom will be there? And of
Mm.
course, it's not a rejection, but sometimes I wonder whether they are an escape from the now for me.
For sure, yeah,
Yeah,
and that's okay too.
exactly.
It's okay to apparently escape the now, although it might just be another avenue of the now.
Yes. Yeah.
And so when I'm encouraging my students, trainees, to learn how to be relational Gestalt psychotherapists, they will sometimes struggle to try and remember all the theories that they've written in the books. And my encouragement is always, forget all that for now. It'll all be in there somewhere.
Mm.
And what I want you to do is to just be who you are in this moment in front of this client and see what's happening, which is a different kind of wisdom. It may be informed by some of the memories that are carried in the body from the books that have been read. Hopefully, to an extent, it will be. But there is, as you're saying, there's some richer depths within every human being. We think we don't know, and we know a lot more than we actually think that we know.
Yeah. No,
You're nodding in agreement with me.
yeah, I'm also sighing in relief to hear something that resonates so deeply. Yeah.
So you know that you know a lot more than you know.
It's also, yeah, exactly, and it's about learning to trust that, and I think that's more of a process. Not only learning what's in the books, but also learning to trust what's inside of the book of my life.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah,
The books and the being.
exactly. Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Mm.
And I'm curious, you mentioned your social work, but what are the events or set of circumstances that shaped and impacted how you are now?
So I suppose social work is one of them, but I think for me, my father was a vicar, a priest, and I was presented as a child as an angelic little choir boy who needed to sing in church on Sundays and needed to be following the word of God, the word of the Gospels, to get everything right and to not be a sinner. So that has had a profound effect on me. And early on, and still occasionally still true, that there's some of that shame of feeling like I'm a sinner, I'm not getting this right, can creep up on me, and was very much a part of my early years. So discovering different spiritual paths, particularly Taoism and Buddhism and Zen, shamanism, paganism, Sufism, many religions that are not so rule bound, but say that God lives within, and the answer is also within, not just in. Again, it relates to what we were saying about the answer is not just in the books, it's not just in the gospel, it's in the being. So that upbringing had a profound effect on me, as did my responses to it, of finding Buddhism, but also I play music, so I was attracted to rock music as a teenager. Wanted to be the opposite of the nice purist Christian music, to make a lot of noise and be very loud, and to be curious about the devil, which for me, I don't draw a distinction between God and the devil. The devil is God's out breath, and it's all one, really. But I needed to work through that in my teenage years through rock music. So I'm answering your question: rock music and the Christian faith that I was brought up in, and finding a different spirituality which is open to me in every single moment, in every encounter, and is found in silence and stillness and nature. Yeah, but Gestalt therapy is the one practice, obviously, that has sang loudest to me. The way that I could blend all of this in together, my heart and soul, my body, my nature. None of it's wrong, it's just co-created with every moment, every person in every moment.
That's interesting. One person I interviewed, he said that for him, psychotherapy, he wasn't a gestaltist, but psychotherapy as a profession, he said it was reconciling principle of kind of allowing him to hold many different polarities as a whole. And it sounds like this enabled you as well a little bit to hold these polarities of the devil and God. And I was actually also wondering, there was one question which stayed with me, is how did your relationship to sin changed, and what is your relationship to sin now?
Oh, wow, what a question. Yeah, well, polarity and paradox. You talked about polarity there. Polarity is something that's very important to me to embrace, as you say, the whole of me and the whole of the other who is in front of me in this moment, you or a client or a friend or a lover, whoever's in front of me, to embrace the whole of who we both are, and the dances that we can get into in that holism, that polarizing that we can get into, but they're all parts of us, and they're all parts of the universe in this universal dance. Paradox is another very important word to me. So it's something to do with holding two absolute opposites and not favoring one or the other. So in my early Christian upbringing, it was to choose right over wrong, to choose God over the devil. But today, they're just different polarities which I hold, which are neither inherently right or wrong. However, they may be more, it might be more appropriate to choose this one in this moment for this situation, but in the next situation, it might be a different. So I'm doing this with my hands because it, or I should do that. It's a coming and a going, and ebbing and a flowing between two polarities. That's for me is the life force. As the breath comes and goes. So our dance between these apparent opposites of right and wrong, day and night, man and woman, black and white, in and out, constantly. So that's a long way from you're a sinner.
And I'm also curious when I think about polarities, there are edges, like, living at the edge of your um, cliff, that there also can be constantly pushed and expanded and explored. And so I'm curious, how do you explore those edges? It sounds like you have done that through your music and through reading and getting in contact with God in a different way. But how do you allow yourself now to go to edges which are unknown unknowns for you?
Right in this moment, I'm at an edge because I'm meeting somebody, you, albeit on a screen. I'm still having a relational encounter with somebody I don't know.
Yeah.
And that this is being recorded and will potentially therefore be visible and shared with a whole lot more than just you and I. That's an edge. And it takes courage to open to this edge, because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what question you're going to answer. I also don't know exactly how I'm going to answer it in this moment, because this moment is me, and yet this me, as we've already said, is changing in relation to how you are and what you're asking me, and your facial expressions and the energy that's moving between us. So I don't exactly know how I'm going to answer. I'm trusting the process, which is one of my favorite key phrases.
I love that one. And I'm also curious, what supports you in that trust, or what supports you now being here with me at the edge?
That whatever happens will be okay. That's a kind of faith. That's a trusting in the process. That's trusting in the wholeness. I could say the wholeness of God, but God is a word that I have previously chosen not to use because it can be so misunderstood, and I didn't like it myself for many years. Now I'm okay with it. But I suppose I could, instead of saying God, I could say in the process of life, trusting in the process of life, trusting in the nature of life, which inherently will have some creation and some destruction. Each form will become formless as we go around the Gestalt cycle. So part of the risk and the part of the existential angst of this moment is that some part of me is going to change and die, and maybe I've been clinging on to that part, and yet it's going to fade and become something new, and that's an in-breath and an out-breath.
Yeah. And in my exploration, actually, I'm noticing as well that means that having a relationship with death is a really important thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So,
and a really natural thing.
Yes, exactly.
We will die. You and I will die.
Yeah,
That's
and this
quite something
moment will die.
This moment, that moment you just referred to has already died.
Yeah.
Now we have another one.
Exactly.
So when you ask me what supports me, it's learning that happens. That, was it Fritz Perls said, to die and be reborn is not easy.
Not at
And
all.
it's not easy, and yet it's happening. It happens through us and to us in each moment.
And you already mentioned this, but maybe you want to add someone else. But who has had an impact of who you are as a human? So you said your relationship with your father, but are there other relationships with other humans or non-humans?
I mentioned the relationship with my father. I would have to put my mother in there as well. So they were both very important relationships. but neither of them perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever we mean by perfect, neither of them satisfied all my needs, and neither of them were attending to me as much as I needed to be attending to. There were gaps. I was one of 4 children, so there was necessarily gaps. Eldest of 4 children, so I had to look after the younger ones. And my father was out working, looking after the parish. So, I'm feeling some of the emotion of that, therefore forgetting some of the thinking now of significant people. Right. So they definitely formed my life. And in those gaps, of course, that has borne fruit, as we say, really, because it enabled me to be curious about those gaps and emptiness and struggles of life, and eventually it enabled me to seek out first social work and also spirituality, and then psychotherapy, in particular Gestalt psychotherapy, to understand the nature of those gaps and what can be done for those gaps in relatedness that existed within me, but then also in meeting other people with their gaps and struggles. So definitely my parents. I would also have to mention Ken Evans, who was a significant teacher of mine in Gestalt. I played many roles in my life, and now sadly has passed away. But he introduced me to Gestalt and had a profound impact on my life in many ways. And he was also a priest.
Oh, I didn't know that. I think I'm blanking now on the name of the guest, but it will come for me. But there was another person that I interviewed that mentioned Ken Evans as a very significant figure for them.
It might have been, I don't know whether you did that interview, but Dave Mann might.
Exactly. Yeah. I don't know. I'm blank. I was like, I know the name of the book, but I don't know the author at the moment. Yes.
Okay.
Dave Mann was the person who said that. Yes, exactly.
Because Dave and I were both trained by Ken, and Dave and I were both in the same training group.
Oh, lovely. Wow.
Yeah.
So it is also, that's another part of Gestalt that's beautiful for me to see is this feeling of connectedness and support among each other, and leaving a mark that is, I would maybe not exaggerate when I say leaving a mark that is as strong as a parental figure.
Yeah. I'm thinking of who else to add to that list. I'm sure that there should be many other people, and some of them would have come in books as well. So obviously, Fritz Perls, I would have to mention him, but also poets like Rumi, Whitman, and of course I can't leave out Martin Buber. I'm totally moved by constantly reading and rereading Martin Buber. Obviously, the spiritual background there helps me and helps me heal some of those splits by reminding us that, as Buber did, that God is in each encounter and the other is as much God, rather than God being up there telling us sinners what we're doing wrong. Buber would say this moment is God at work. And this meeting between you and I is the meeting of gods, or God and Goddess, in communication, in harmony, in co-creation.
Yes, and I'm also curious in that co-creation, in that dance, how do you feel yourself and the other at the same time, and kind of look at the painting that is co-created. So see the you, the me, and the us at the same time.
How do I do that?
Mm-hmm. What happens for
Mm.
you?
That's a slightly different question. So how do I do it? I suppose it's by moving backwards and forwards.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, the coming and going is the life process.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes my attention's more over with you, particularly when you're asking a question, or,
Mm-hmm.
or smiling or nodding, and I'm noticing that in your world. And then coming back, how does that land in my world? What's happening in my touch in my heart now? What's happening in my heart, or my gut, or my whole body? That's something of the how, the energy moving between the two of us in this moment. There was another part to it, though. I've forgotten the second part of your question there.
And how do you feel the us? As in, like, you're feeling what's happening to me or what's happening to you in relation to me, but then the bigger field that is co-created between, or the in between. So I don't know if I make sense actually now, but I will maybe use a metaphor that we did in our training, where we had a heart and we were drawing on it, and it was neither mine nor my partner,
Mm, mm,
but it
mm,
was ours. Um,
mm.
and that was
Nice.
that is an interesting part of the dialogic relationship, as you mentioned in the
Mm,
very beginning, the in between. So I'm
mm,
curious, how do you experience the in between? What happens for you?
mm. I love your example there. The between absolutely excites me, and I'm totally passionate about um, what is this between, and what is this between that we're creating now. You coming with your questions, and bringing that to between, and I'm coming with my answers. But then there's something that happens in the middle,
Mm-hmm.
that where our answers are going. I didn't know that I was going to talk about some of these things that I've talked about today. I didn't know that I would go so much into spirituality, or into my parents, for example, or even out onto the oceans of Yorkshire and Greece. I didn't know that that was going to happen, but suddenly that has happened. That's been co-created by some of your interests, some of what you bring in, and some of that which authentically resonates with me. And I think it's that authentic resonance that's really important, because I'm touching my heart again. It's it's through not being so fixated with the mind and all that I've learned in my mind, but dropping down into the spaces in this physical body that read and resonate with the whole of my being.
Mm. And I'm curious, as you started your Gestalt process, what was the challenge for you? Which part was your growth edge? Because spirituality seems to be already present for you, and dropping down somehow was already present for you. But what do you think has challenged you in your process of gestalting?
Well, dropping down in and living in the now, and in my body, and noticing my authenticity is still a practice for me.
Mm-hmm.
I still get distracted by otherness. I think it's some of the messages that I learned as a child in the Christian faith. I'm coming back to that again. Was about serving others and serving God, and what that meant was being empathically attuned to the other and what the other wants, or in my family situation, what my mother wants to help her with, or all these younger siblings. So tuning into otherness has been such a strong message, which kind of trains me to be a therapist in some ways, but it doesn't train me to be a relational therapist because I need to bring that all back to me. Yeah. And so that has been a challenge and still is a challenge at times too. But it's okay for me to think about me, to me to check in, what are my needs? And as I started by saying, that's not only okay, that's essential to celebrate those differences, the needs in you, the needs in me, and the way they come together in harmony and sometimes in dissonance and sometimes in resonance, that dance. But that has been a challenge, even though I can speak of it fairly well now and live it fairly well now, it still exists as a challenge.
Yeah, I can absolutely relate to that. I actually even had a therapy session a week ago, which was exactly about this. How do I feel myself and not get lost in the other or in the needs of the other? So yeah. And I'm curious, how do you experience or live your gender? And is that something that is in any way figural for you?
Can you ask the question again? Because the
How do you
Zoom seemed to freeze.
How do you live and experience your gender? And is that in any way figural for you?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's an interesting question in these times, isn't it? Where so many people are questioning the introject of physical gendering, and which I absolutely welcome. Let's challenge all the introjects and find the ones that resonates with us, and that might change in each moment. So I resonate with the story of being a man, but I also know that I have feminine qualities. So we'll come back again to what we were saying about finding the whole of me and the polarities that are within me. I believe those polarities are within all of us, the masculinity and the femininity. And then we're trained to have roles in society that go along with those. But it's our duty to question those and check out whether they're right for us in each different moment. But I wouldn't want either to get lost, either in me or in my relationships to women, to men, to our culture. I don't think it's about finding one. I think it's about embracing and celebrating both masculinity and femininity in all its forms. So there's something about femininity which I think is about yielding and surrender, some kind of holding and some kind of flow. There's something about masculinity which is about making clear decisions and directions and being firm and pushing that out there into the world. We need both of these. We all need both of these. I'm excited by the questions around gender. Excited by the third possibility. So if you're not male, you're not female, then what's this third space? And does that third space, does it have to have a label?
Yeah.
Can it not just be an unknown? I'm not jumping into the male or the female. I'm just hanging out in this not knowing until I want to choose some kind of form to play with and dance with and move with. And how that changes with each encounter. What do I feel like doing now? Do I feel like being softer and more yielding to your questions? Or do I feel like pushing through with some of my answers and my passions and that ebb and flow between us?
And I'm curious in this context, what what has been maybe most surprising for you, or something that you have excluded most because of the cultural conditioning of gender? Something that you didn't access in yourself because you were a man. Um,
Mhm.
and was there anything like that? It might not have been.
I would go straight back to surrender, to yielding. I think they're probably difficult for all humans, male and female, but surrendering and yielding, um,
Mm.
going with what is,
Mm.
which sometimes can run contrary to what my ego self or my needing self thinks that it wants in this moment, emphasized thinks, because
Mhm.
that might not always be correct. Sometimes there are greater wisdoms beyond what I think I want.
Mm.
Um, that's another part of trusting the process.
Mm.
So surrender, I think, to otherness is a challenge, has been a challenge. It's an interesting challenge which I want to and will do keep working on relationally with
Mm.
um, within my personal relationships, within my professional relationships with my clients.
Mm.
So yeah, it makes me immediately be curious. I don't know if this is the rules of the game, to whether I can ask you the same question.
Oh,
What is
absolutely.
it? What is it about you being female that has meant that there's a so-called masculine attribute that you've paid less attention to, and what would that be?
Um, I think for me, anger was dressed in sadness, um, and trying to get in touch, or not trying to get in touch, but whenever I would get angry, I would start crying, and it
Mhm.
took some time for me to actually name that this is anger. This is about me being wanting to move away from something, not actually being sad. Or it's like the two are mixed somehow, because I think I felt the expression of anger and rage was somehow not available to me.
Oh yeah, that's so common, isn't it, for women?
Yeah, yeah.
The anger gets dressed up as sadness because that's the way that you've been brought up to be.
Yes, exactly, exactly. That's one thing. And I think another surprising thing that happened to me was um rejecting a lot of my feminine qualities, which are culturally rejected. Yielding is definitely one of them,
Mhm.
but it's also aesthetics, um, like abundance. Because I had this, I really love dressing up and changing colors and things like that. But then there was a period of life where I was like, almost like I'm now talking about this like as a military discipline, but my dad was a military doctor. But um, as in like, oh, like if you want to be successful, just wear one color so that there is not much things, so that you to pay attention, so you can actually be focused on whatever goal you have to be. So I actually was weirdly much more masculine, much more in my masculine energy. And that was even again different because I was then not allowed. So then people would be like, mm, you don't belong here. It's like again, not a sense of not belonging, because I'm in a profession, I'm a scientist that's very precise, masculine, goal oriented. And so it was always this paradox of, again, I was in between. I didn't need to label, and the only time I realized I never questioned the masculine and the feminine until someone comes and tells me you can't do this because you're a woman. And then I
Yeah.
started, well, what does it even mean to be a woman? Because I've always felt like I can do this. It didn't feel very masculine to me. It felt very natural. So there was a lot of complexity in unpacking that and kind of bringing back the soft, the sensual, and integrating that with the strong, goal-oriented, and productive person. A long answer to this question for me, actually.
It's a great answer, and I'm glad that you have all that in your awareness now, because hopefully you can be supported enough to be the woman you are.
Yeah, that I think takes time to find the inner and the outer support for that.
Yeah. Okay. Well, take a bit of my support.
Thank you a lot.
bring all your colors and your anger.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really something that that's another thing that an angry woman is labeled a bitch, and I have said that to myself so many times. It's like, why are you being such a bitch? And even that word is so strong in me, and it still comes out sometimes. So yeah,
And there's
it's
so much passion there. I heard it when you said bitch. I could hear what an energy there is there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so going back to the dance, I'm curious, how are you experiencing your age? And is there something that has brought you that awareness of
Age.
age? Yeah.
Age is a challenge.
In which way?
In a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm approaching 60 now. I don't feel 60 at all, but I know that I'm approaching 60 because my body is telling me things are going wrong. I have more appointments with the doctor, etc. I ache a bit more when I go on a walk. I need my sleep, definitely.
I'm 30 and I need my sleep as well.
Sure, we all need our sleep. But, I've recently been at a couple of parties where people were going on celebrating birthdays up until 2 or 3 in the morning. It's not for me. I can't do 2 or 3 in the morning anymore. That's definitely an age thing. I used to be able to do it when I was younger. I'm also a grandfather. So that's an age thing. And there's a death thing there as well. I know that I'm getting nearer to death. I've now made my will because I know that from this age onwards, it gets more likely. I do attend, as I said, the GP so that I can keep a good track on my health and look after myself as well as I can. But at this age, I know that death is approaching. And I like to be slower, and I like quieter music. I don't like rock music as much. I like quiet, gentle folk music. I like silence and stillness much more than I did when I was younger. Much more. But I also that there are good things. There's a wisdom that comes with age. I realized that I do know 1 or 2 things, including knowing how important it is not to know. There's a wisdom in that. There's a wisdom in learning to trust the process and learning to sit with silence and learning to wait. I don't always know immediately what to say, and that's okay, because I can just feel the moment, and something will and does always happen.
Emerge, yeah. That's, I think, one of the biggest challenges for me in psychotherapy training is the stillness and allowing things to emerge. And it's such
Yeah,
a beautiful, I think it's a beautiful when it happens, and when I experience it in work with other people, it is, yeah, there is something wonderful about that space.
mm, you're absolutely right. To be able to trust and treasure that space is
Mm,
such a beautiful thing. I do remember when I was training and seeing clients for the first time, and a silence or a space would happen, and I would try and think of questions. I would make questions up out of my discomfort to fill the space. And what I realized, of course, is that I learned a lot less
yeah.
about my client and about the between. I learned a lot less than if I just stayed with the silence.
Mm,
And again, dropping down into the whole being between us.
mm,
There's so much more there. I suppose it's kind of like entering the void,
yeah.
because the void is full of potential.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's limitless potentiality,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and allowing that energy in is such a profound thing to do.
Mm.
It's like they say, particularly with grief, they say that time is a healer, but in that time is also entering the void.
Yeah.
It's listening to the silence and the stillness and the emptiness.
Mm.
That's a source of healing. And I suppose in that sense, I've spoken of it before like this, that the void is the between of the between.
Mm.
It's the deeper between. Because there's a silence and a stillness within you. I see you nodding, and I am recognizing that space that lives in you and lives in me, lives in us all
Mm.
somewhere. Maybe Carl Jung would have called it the collective unconscious.
Yeah, I'm just, as you're talking, I'm just thinking exactly about that. I have started yesterday reading a book which is called Mothers and Daughters, but it's about the myth of Persephone and her going into the underground. And
Mm,
as you are
mm.
talking, I am actually feeling the sinking in that underground, and what does it mean to be lost and to lose. And then there was also another image for me. I was making a collage of in the background was a nebula, and nebula actually is basically a fertile void, as I started to understand, because it's a collection of dust and particles that slowly gathers the energy to birth a new star. And
Wow, that's great.
so there is so much in what you said that was really resonating with me, actually.
Mm, mm,
Mm.
mm.
And there was one question that stayed with me is when you said you're a grandfather, how do you think that relationship is different than being a father, and what has that brought for you? Um, what has happened for you in that new role?
Mm. I'm thinking of my granddaughter as you're giving me that question. There's there's something very different about being a grandfather. Um, Jokingly, I know that people often say that the great thing about grandkids is you can give them back, and there's certainly some truth in that. That the entire responsibility of this little being is not sitting with me in its entirety. That's the role of the parents. So the role of the grandfather, and indeed the grandmother, but the role of the grandfather comes in and just has that momentary meeting. Of course, there are times when I have been left in her charge, so I have to protect her and keep an eye out. But there's something exquisite about not carrying the burden of the responsibility, but still being able to meet with the raw beingness of this small young child that is just in awe of discovering the universe and everything about it. So I watch her and look at her and look into her eyes. She's absolutely open to the universe, and that vulnerability, that softness is exquisitely beautiful. Touches me just to be in that moment with her, and just to watch the first stirrings of the being that she is, as distinct from her parents or grandparents. There's a little cheekiness of her that's popping through in her play and resistance, but her absolute fascination of being in the moment. That's the thing that children have. They live mostly in the moment until the parents come along and start disturbing that moment, or encouraging them to use the moment in a better, more creatively different way. But the other day, she sat on my lap and I read her a story, and she watched with, she's read the same story before, but she watched with such joy and passion, and maybe it was also my attention to her that was part of that beautiful moment.
And I'm now curious, as you're saying that, what is a story that you have read over and over and has impacted you differently every time, and you were able to see it with new eyes? What are you coming back to?
Which story?
For you.
Well, the one that came to mind as you answered was the story of the Gestalt cycle. The story of how we meet our needs or how we interrupt or modify our needs. And the number of times that I've come back to that, I still learn something new. I taught it actually only last week to some students just beginning, and still I'm learning about my relationship to these powers that we have, because I think those modifications are powers that we have. They're not faults in the system. They're not ways that I'm fucked up. They are things that I can do to manage the situation, creative adjustments, we call it.
A toolbox.
Absolutely a toolbox, yes. So, I can project out, I can hold things in. I can do all these things. I can be totally confluent and cooperate with you if I need to survive this moment, or to find new ways of being together. And then I can differentiate out and find some contact and trust the differences between us, and feel that energetic exchange which is always there in contact. So I'm gonna go for the Gestalt cycle as that particular story.
And whose version of that story you prefer to read?
Well, I do acknowledge the old sources of that story, but the one that I prefer to read is the one that emerges between me and my students when I teach it, the new one. There's something, another particular passion of mine in Gestalt is to be fascinated by the emerging Gestalt. Gestalt is about a process that's unfolding. So although I appreciate what Peirce, Hefferlein and Goodman and all the old theorists have done, my passion is to transcend and include both the old theoretical traditional teachings and bring them to a more contemporary relational Gestalt. I now put relational in front of Gestalt. I know that all psychotherapy is relational, and some will argue we don't need that word there, but for me, it reminds us of our interrelatedness with each other and with the planet.
And now that we are talking about Gestalt, you mentioned how did you come to this to Gestalt therapy, but what attracted you most about Gestalt?
I think the spirituality that it had Buddhism in its makeup. That attracted me to it. I didn't really know about all the Buddha stuff until I got into it. But I think I've answered similarly before, earlier on, that it's something about being able to be the whole of me, and it's particularly about discovering this so-called authentic me. That it's actually okay for me to be me, to be curious and interested and passionate about that which stirs in me and says, yes, I'm interested in that. Yes, this is the way my energy flows. That's okay. It's not all wrong. That's still a revelation to me. It's been a revelation in these last few years, particularly where it's now okay to be interested in nature and ecology, because in nature and ecology is something that I'm passionate about and always have been. And now it's okay to write about it and talk about it in Gestalt and in contemporary psychotherapy. Not only is it necessary, it's essential now that we talk about it, include it, and know that nature is us.
Yeah. I mean, as you were talking in the beginning, and I can't really explain this image, but I will send it to you later. There is an painting I've seen in a museum in Brussels, where there is a man and a woman lying, but they're drawn as nature, and so kind of undifferentiated from nature, almost as if they're one. I will send that image and post it
Please,
somewhere. But
please do. That
as you
sounds
were
great.
talking, it came very vividly to me, even in the beginning as we were talking. And related to this question is, how do you think Gestalt has affected you as a person? And you partly, I think, answered this, but maybe you want to add.
What could I add to that question? So I've mentioned the holism, I've mentioned the sitting with the polarities and the paradoxes. And there's something about Gestalt teaching me about each human encounter in so much as that, because I used to be really quiet and shy when I was younger. I didn't know what to say, and through Gestalt and through learning to be more relational, I worked out actually what to say is not just something I have to prepare. It's something that's going to emerge out of the encounter. So I'm still learning that, because in preparation for this interview, I was thinking, what do I say? Should I have a whole list of answers written down, or should I go back and read some books? Um, I don't do that now, because I've got some faith in me, in my process. I do know a thing or two of having done this Gestalt thing for 30 odd years. I know something, and so Gestalt has helped me to trust the moment, that somehow your questions will land somewhere in me, and something will happen between us, and words and forms will emerge, and so they have,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and so they will always.
Yeah. And that's an interesting thing for me, that it didn't come for me from Gestalt. I always felt the dialogical part was always there for me. And it's what has been, I think, part of the curiosity about the other and about the world. That wonder that you were describing about from your granddaughter, I felt like
Mm,
that wonder is basically what allows me to be relational, because the expectation is there's no expectation. It's just the wonder. So that's
mm,
yeah.
mm, mm. And it's not inherently Gestalt, is it? Because it's been around longer than Gestalt's been
Yes.
around. It's
Exactly.
it. I mean, I might call it nature,
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
trusting in the nature, the natural process of life,
Yeah.
energies.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly.
But Gestalt has learnt to spot them and give them names,
Yeah.
reminds us of those primal beings that we are already.
Yes. Exactly.
Mm.
And I didn't ask one question which is not Gestalt related, but how do you hold power and privilege in your life, and what's your relationship to them?
Power and privilege. Sometimes I hold power uncomfortably.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'm a white, privileged male by virtue of my birth, eldest son of a vicar, born into some kind of power by virtue of all of that. That doesn't sit terribly comfortably with me, particularly these days. I have that privilege, and I have been relatively poor as a student and as a young parent, but I've always been able to have a roof over my head and always put food on the table, and I kind of trust that will always happen.
Mm.
Um, Power, I realize that I have certain powers. I realize this more and more. I've realized it more being a director of a psychotherapy training institute, and as being a course leader with 30 years of experience. So I sit before all my students, and they project onto me
Mm-hmm.
uh, all this power, and to some extent I hold it because there's a truth in it.
Mm-hmm.
And in other ways, I hand it straight back, and say, let's explore this together, because there are wisdoms and powers within you also. So my way of teaching is I don't stand at the front of the lecture theatre and give out all the wisdom of all the answers. We have a topic, and I will ask people to look inside themselves, or to discuss in small groups and see what they already know about each subject. And what's amazing is that they will find between them quite a lot of those answers without me having to actually tell them, because maybe we're dipping down again into the collective unconscious here, into the spiritual wisdoms of the world, that sometimes these beings that we are, the depths contain a lot of answers. So the power that I have, I also don't have, because I can give it away and it'll come back, and I can give it away and it'll come back, and I have it and don't have it. That paradox again. I'll come back to that.
Yeah. And what is next for you in Gestalt therapy as you see it?
Well, to continue doing what I'm doing, to keep teaching and passing on what I've learned. I will do for as many years as my body lets me.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm interested in doing, as well as teaching, is to do more writing, to write some articles and a book, which is all about bringing Gestalt along, not leaving it stuck in the past, but the exciting way of the Gestalt is becoming is a passion of mine. I have words to say, and I have words to discover in relationship to others.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
In particular, I still think Gestalt has got a lot to do to come away from the individualistic approach of taking responsibility. Now, I don't want to lose the individual or the way that we take responsibility, but I want us to move into, I want us to move, sounds like it's just me. I sense something greater than just me, because I see it echoed in other writings and hear it from other people too, is to move into more what I call field consciousness. Mm-hmm. So the consciousness of the whole field that moves through us all. Mm-hmm. So it's not just me, it's us. Mm-hmm. And that field consciousness is an awareness of what we all need in appreciation of our differences and diversities. And it's an appreciation of what the planet needs. Yeah. How we need to behave with respect to the earth that we live on. Mm-hmm. I think there's an enormous amount for Gestalt to grow into there, and I think it is doing so. Mm-hmm. I have every faith and hope for how Gestalt is blossoming, and I think particularly because Gestalt believes in, it's inherent in the Gestalt philosophy to see that it's all changing, to embrace the novel and the new, as we were speaking about earlier. Therefore, it's made to keep on going. Mm-hmm. Even if it changes its name, it will live forever.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting that I had the idea of ecological consciousness and awareness, but not as in ecological only about nature, but also like a more big systems view.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you feel like there is a Gestalt community for you?
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At the beginning of all our training weekends, we have at the beginning and at the end, we have half an hour which we call community time. So mm-hmm. all the different training process groups come in to be in one room, and we call it community time. And part of community time, I will also mention the larger Gestalt community, UK AGP conferences, EAGT conferences. So that community plugs into larger communities. Community, I think, is another part of the essential way that we all need to grow as human beings and as Gestalt psychotherapists.
And is there something that I haven't asked you, but you would want to add to this interview?
No, I don't think so. I've enjoyed your resonances and responses, affirmations like you're smiling and nodding and saying yes. You don't seem like you're disagreeing with any of what I say.
That's
Is that
interesting.
true?
I'm thinking, but nothing came that I was like, oh. Normally, I would probably have a visible reaction on something that that deeply does not resonate. But
Okay.
I just guess it was not figural in this interview.
Okay. So that dissonance we didn't find,
Mm-hmm.
not
Mm-hmm.
not in this interview, not yet.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was an interesting experience for me. The body movement for me from beginning towards the end. It was a lot of stillness in the beginning, and then a lot of energy after I started talking. That was there. That's where I felt like I actually like to talk and bring myself in. So
Yeah.
that was a very interesting energy shift that I have noticed, for example.
Mm. So how was the interview for you?
Yeah, as I said, it was one word that comes to mind is validating.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then again, I felt the ebbs and flows, and that was quite
Mm.
beautiful. Because again, I felt there was a really different shifts in energy, also in your body movement and in your posture. And then I think I learned some things. And I think in the beginning you mentioned things like the in between and about in between and the now, and that was a really beautiful thing for me. The um, the now contains the past and the future, and it's the now is
Oh.
much larger than the narrow now, and that was
Mm.
something that I think I haven't had before in my awareness, so that was something that I really liked. So yeah.
Mm. 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 Mm.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm noticing how I'm enjoying your affirmation of what I've shared. So I feel like I obviously have done quite a lot of talking, so understanding how it lands within you
Mm,
is also interesting. And it's part of your co-creation too,
yeah.
this
and
interview.
and then there was another one thing that is I felt a very human human to human relatedness.
Yes.
Although Gestalt seemed to be something that brought us together, I felt a sort of a co-regulation and a contact, almost as almost as having at moments an I Darwin experience.
Mm. Yes, that was my experience too. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm.
Thank
So
you.
I sense that we're coming towards an end here. I've
Yes.
got a prayer, a relational Gestalt prayer that I wrote. I wondered if I could read it as a way of finishing.
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
Okay, I've just got it here on my phone. So just pull it up. Okay, so a relational Gestalt prayer. This mysterious thing that does I also does you. As much as we are done to, we do. We are complementary beings. This thing is everything. Our co-created natural energy life being. In this, we are both lost and found endlessly. Expectations are fleeting situations that fall away in the unfurling unknown of our mutual reciprocity. We dance the I and you and the truth beyond two, where nothing needs to be known and everything is told in silence, stillness, love, song, and dance. I am I in my unique beauty, and you are you in yours. We meet sometimes in absolute splendor, and then we meander in relative aloneness and beyond. We meet in a procession of selves, by choosing to confirm all that is, just as it is, always, already, here and now.
Mm. We'll just stop here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you. It's nice to share this moment with you.